So the lead author on this paper, Dr. Johanna Harvey, is a postdoctoral research associate here at the University of Maryland. She was able to collate data from multiple different data sources, from USGS, from USDA, from Canada, looking at the different species, comparing this across time, the magnitude of the deaths that we've seen, comparing that historically. It also looked at how the disease came into the US to be able to start to address what's actually going on with this highly pathogenic avian influenza and what makes it so different. The unique thing about the outbreak that we're seeing right now is that it's hitting lots of different wild birds beyond our typical waterfowl. So colonial nesting birds, raptors. Managing wild birds that fly, I mean, really, they fly, they can go anywhere, makes it real. There's no one point that we can manage the species. They also use different types of habitat, different nesting. They travel, they migrate. And so in general, doing that kind of management for a specific disease, especially one that is so deadly, is near impossible. Because of the numerous species it's impacting, we're not really sure what's our best bet. Do we go and change a water level to attract or decrease the likelihood that birds are going to land in a particular place? Do we remove nesting material? Do we scare birds off of a facility? Do we have people have to go through some kind of cleaning process of equipment or their shoes when they're coming in and out of an area? One of the biggest is, do we remove carcasses of birds that have died? We have been unable to do testing to see, does this really reduce the likelihood of other animals getting this avian influenza? Not only that, we have lots of different federal state agencies, including NGOs, that all try and address avian influenza, but the lines of communication and who does what and who's responsible for what, if we see the highly pathogenic avian influenza continue, like we've seen it in the past 2 years, becomes really messy. And so we need to start to address how we're going to handle a disease that is indicating it might become endemic in the United States, like we've seen in Asia and Europe. The worst case scenario would be that we see, again, extremely high spikes of this avian influenza in spring and summer of this year. So we're about to start this season. We see that, and it continues, and it's widespread across bird species into even more mammal species. It's fairly urgent in that we have much better communication across federal agencies and state agencies, and we have action plans in place for us to be able to immediately jump as we start to see the disease peaking again, because it spreads so fast. So instead of looking at all our options and choosing one, what we're saying is it's time to use a scientific approach to decision making so that we can guide those best the resources that we have. So that's what I mean, like the cost benefit analysis. So you're getting experts from Europe who have already experienced this. Bring them to the table and say, okay, if you could go back, should we be looking at? What should we be doing now? Getting that kind of information is before we make management decisions is not necessarily how we typically handle these kinds of disease situations. And so it's decision analysis. So we're thinking about the decisions we have to make, and we're prioritizing what's the most important decision we have to make first. And all of that kind of hinges on what scale are we making decisions on? Are we talking about at a national wildlife refuge? What do we do for Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge versus what do we do for the Eastern Flyway, right? The Mississippi Flyway. Those are very different questions. And so understanding our specific question and using that to dictate what's the most important decision we have to make first. We can't sit back and react to it once it's here. We really need to be planning for what's already shown us is probably going to happen given the specific characteristics of the disease. So that's really what the paper's saying. It's time. We need to do this now. We need to start thinking about this now and bring all of the important players and the people who have experience with this in other countries to the table now to help guide our management.